Welcome to Firm Factor, the show that helps lawyers master the business of law, with your hosts, John Avi Socha and Rebecca Hamer.
Welcome, everyone. My name's John Socha. This is Firm Factor. Apologies to those in the audience that were expecting a slightly different name. We decided that we wanted to pivot right after our preseason, so we are changing the name just a little. But I am so privileged to be joined by my new co-host, Rebecca. Introduce yourself to the people. This has been a very long time coming, so I'm very excited to get started. Rebecca,
Yes.
who the hell are you?
Who the hell am I? I'm Rebecca, and I am the Director of Marketing for a legal marketing company called Legal Rev, and I have been working with John for a couple of years. I currently live in Portugal. That's the beauty of being a digital nomad and being able to work digital first, is I've been here for a couple of years, and I'm going to be moving to New Zealand soon. So I am an international director of marketing by, I suppose, by the opportunities that I've been given to move around and do the job that I do.
So first off, Legal Rev, what the hell is that? No one's ever heard of, at least like I'm pretty keyed into the industry. And people always ask me, hey, who does your firm work with? Because for those of you who do not know, we are clients of Legal Rev and have been for a long time. This podcast was actually originally our pitched idea, which is kind of crazy. And it's even crazier that Legal Rev said yes. But who are you guys? Because I feel like I know you have such a large portfolio, but you seem to be very under the sort of like hidden gems. So tell us just a little bit about Legal Rev, and then tell me why you guys are all remote, even like before it was really cool, because this was pre-COVID.
It was pre-COVID, that's true. So Legal Rev is a legal marketing company that's been around for over 15 years. So one of the earliest, actually, to the stage. We do actually have the majority of our team is in the Pacific Northwest, but we also have a large number of the team that just work remotely. And Darren, who set the company up, who is very technologically minded and saw this opportunity to work with lawyers, and to a large degree saw that there were a lot of lawyers 16 years ago that just were not online, and that is where people were starting to search. So set up Legal Rev, and it has grown so that we have lawyers across the US. We have many lawyers that stay with us, 7, 8, 9 years plus. And the team is stretched, as I say, majority in the Pacific Northwest, but we have other team members in Australia, in Europe, and the beauty of being able to work remotely and digitally means that we obviously are able to work across different time zones, which means that we can give coverage to clients at different points. But it also means that we're able to have a team that brings different expertise from different areas to the lawyers that we serve in the US.
And tell me, why legal marketing? Why are you here? You have years in the industry. Everyone has a different reason for being in legal marketing if they're not so foolish as to be in a law firm like me. Why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. So full disclosure is Darren actually approached me and asked me to be involved. He's extended family, and he wanted to bring me into the fold and bring the skill set that I have. So I've worked with branding and marketing for 10 years plus, and he wanted me to come and work and be involved. So I was really interested in the challenge, to be honest with you. So I've worked across different categories in the career that I've had, largely CPG. We call it FMCG in New Zealand, but largely CPG clients. So working with companies like Coca-Cola and working with companies like Schweppes and having big clients that I worked with. I was really interested in the idea of taking that marketing skill set across to a very different industry. I was really interested in that challenge of, especially with clients working across, sort of B2C with some clients, which was really interesting to me. And for Darren to sort of put that challenge to me and say, I'd really like to see what you can bring to the table. So it's anything that is an interesting challenge to me, I'm prepared to go, which is why I've pivoted a few times in my career. And this was very much an interesting challenge because it wasn't a category that I was familiar with at all 3 years ago. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey to work within the industry.
And what mistakes? What hot takes? Tell us what your clients either do that you wish they didn't, or tell us what the legal industry does that you wish wasn't necessary to talk about. Like, what are you frustrated about? What real problems are you there to solve, not just on paper as like a legal marketer, which is like a whole other thing we need to get into. But like, what do you need to tackle?
One of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure any marketer says this, but is trying to get across the idea that you have to actually invest a certain amount to stay competitive. So I would say that a lot of the lawyers that we work with understand that they need to do something, but the level of investment that it might take to beat their competitors. And as you said earlier on, a lot of lawyers, it's sort of a zero-sum game to them, so they feel very, very competitive with their other lawyers. But when it comes to actually wanting to invest time and resource into marketing their business to compete, that can be a challenging conversation. The other thing I would say is in terms of being able to find the time to participate in their own success. So I appreciate that with a lot of lawyers, time is money, right? And I think one of the challenges is that often we make recommendations, or we might require something from a lawyer in order to give them a competitive advantage, something that we might need them to do. Let's say it's images we might need them to supply of their office and their team in order to try and get a better Google business profile. And we might not have that supplied for months on end. And we know that that's having an impact with their digital presence. So that can be a challenge, is the sort of the disconnect between, yes, I want you to provide me these services, but no, I don't have the time to provide you what's required to do the best I can with those services. So that can be a frustration, I guess, is because we really want to do the best that we can for a client, and we know that sometimes simple things can make a big difference. So I would say that the time element is one where lawyers feel that they have handed over the service to you, which they have to a large degree, and then they don't want to have to do anything to it because they have paid for that service. Whereas in reality, we will often need things from them to do the best work that we can.
Well, I mean, and that's what's so interesting about our relationship, both working between Hemet Law and Legal Rev, is because half of my job, I am the sole point of contact, and I do nothing other than interface with your team. And I think what makes our relationship so special is that so many attorneys, like, they disperse their attention, right? They don't have a single point of contact, and they don't have a specific vision about what marketing profile they want to pursue. Because I'd be interested to hear your definition of what marketing is, because my definition of marketing is that marketing is just good storytelling, right? We get so wrapped up in talking about top of funnel, bottom of funnel, KPI, whatever. But all this stuff is just quantitative ways of expressing a story, right? And so I'd love to hear your perspective about that.
I think it's definitely, I would agree. And certainly coming from a background which is heavily in brand as well, I think that it is a story. I would perhaps just sidestep it a little, say it's about connection. So it is about connecting to someone's deepest desires at the right place, and at the right time, at the right price. So I think for me, story is a big part of that, because we connect with stories. That's a very primal reaction, and I think that's, if you can get someone and connect with them with what they desire through story, fantastic. There are some people that connect through different stories, of course, and that's the key thing, is for, I think, any marketer to find what is going to be the right story. Now, what's great is we now have a lot more tools to be able to A/B test, so you can try different stories out and see what resonates, because I do think there is with marketers, I do think that there is gut reaction, and I do think that you can be an intuitive marketer, but we also have the real privilege now of being able to test our hypotheses. So I definitely think story plays a part, but for me it is about how can I connect with this person. And for one person, the connecting point may be price. For another person, it may be placement, it may be location, proximity, and for another person, it's emotional. I personally believe that everything has an emotional component. So I think we buy emotionally and then we justify rationally. So for me, it's about trying to find that beautiful Venn diagram of, I'm connecting with you on an emotional level so that you buy into the story, you're connected. And that could be actually through a story of scarcity, or it could be a story of opportunity, or it could be, sort of any kind of story that allows the person to then justify buying.
I think that's a beautiful contrast, because my job at Hemet Law is to fully inform the client, as because my job is basically I run all our operations, I interface and sort of filter our brand through Legal Rev's fine work. My job is to get a consumer interested in buying at a moment of maximum irrationality, which irrational decision making is what drives high margin. Like, by our analysis, high margin decisions are the ones that are irrational, right? Moments of high emotional touch points is when people make big moves, which is why baby clothes are 8 times as expensive per square inch as adult clothes, funerals, weddings, job searching. Any moment of heightened stress is a time. That's also why advertisers don't give a fuck about people over 65. Because my grandfather has had the same pair of shoes since 2011, right? He's very smart. He doesn't buy anything. And what's so interesting about legal marketers and law firms is that they are equally irrational, right? What stories should law firms, in your opinion, be telling to resonate most with consumers these days?
It's a great question. It is very specific to the type of law, I would say. So it is not a one-size-fits-all. It is definitely, obviously, if you are in family law, the kind of resonating message is going to be extremely different to, if you're criminal defense, for example. I would say, though, one of the things I think is important for clever marketing is to think about the really obvious message. So, for example, let's say that you were trusts and wills and you were doing that kind of legal work. Obviously, you want to be appealing to people that are starting, want to plan for their family, but you want to think about the different points in their life where that is going to be an emotional decision. So basically tapping into what you're saying there. So working with real estate companies, working with brokers, and because that is going to be the time when people are actually going to be emotional, because not that many, especially with first homes or family homes, decisions are entirely rational.
Yep.
But that's the time that people are maybe going to start thinking about trust. They're going to, especially if there are unique tax situations in a state, they are going to be thinking about it then. So it's trying to think about, I suppose, with your particular practice area, where are the emotional points that are adjacent that we can actually utilize to market to. So in that situation, as I say, it could be with working with real estate companies. It could be that if it's someone that's just about to have a baby, is what ways could you perhaps post online on a parenting journal, for example, to sort of talk about the importance of setting up your future for your family and trying to do things that way. So as I say, it's not a one size fits all, but I do think that every practice area can think, what are the adjacent opportunities that are emotional? Because on the surface, those don't necessarily feel like emotional purchases. They don't feel like an emotional service to use. Writing your will it's not necessarily particularly emotive. In some ways it's quite functional, but in other ways it's extremely emotive. So how can you tap into that in a positive, I don't want to say opportunistic way, but a way that both provides your service and means that people will come to you because they believe that you are going to deliver on the emotional and functional need?
I'm interested in what you have to think about this, because I do have a one size fits all answer to this question.
Okay. I'm really interested.
Yes, yeah. So the theory of my career, and I've done, I've given talks to attorneys before, and I told them I was just at the Clio Law Firm Leadership Summit. I was one of their capstone speakers, and I told 150 law firms that we had on the call or whatever, and I asked them, what do you guys sell? Right? What do we sell as legal practitioners, right? And I sat there in silence for like 10 seconds and let everyone think, and I said, you're all wrong. right? Legal practitioners, they think that they sell output, right? They sell trust and estate documents. They sell a divorce. They sell legal advice, documents, research, right? Whatever mechanical output they may be doing, settlements, whatever. That's not the product. That's a side effect of what they actually do. What all legal practitioners actually do is they sell control. They sell agency and control and care amongst a world and a system that does not care about their client at all, right? That would grind their client up to dust in a split second. And you as a practitioner are brought in to either move the needle in their favor or give the perception of that needle moving in their favor, which I would argue that the perception of control and control in the human condition are the same thing. They're indistinguishable. If you, if you think you are in control, then you are, right? Whether or not that actual reality. And I think that's where the disconnect of so many law firms and the needs of their clients comes from, is that like managing a legal case is like getting into a Waymo car, a driverless car in San Francisco, and then the car is going like 90 miles an hour. It's taking sudden turns. The client can't get to the brakes, the accelerator, or the steering wheel. And then we arrive at the destination. Client like falls out thinking like, oh my God, I'm alive. And then the attorney goes, mission accomplished. That couldn't have gone any better. I got you there in one piece. And the client was like, that's horrible. I had no influence. That felt like everything was just happening to me. And so like I would push back and say that like, I don't think it matters what practice area you are. The mind as an operator, because that's my job. Is like I don't do the marketing. I do the customer service internally, and we're in family law.
I mean, I agree with you in that I think the fundamental. The fundamental feeling that someone is trying to purchase is absolutely there. I suppose what I was talking about previously was more actually how you connect with them. So I don't disagree. I think that you are buying peace of mind and you are buying confidence. And I think that, again, actually comes down to some of the fundamentals actually of marketing is sort of understanding systems as well, is understanding that a lot of people don't like to be in the system, but they also recognize that if they, when it comes to things like legal parameters, they want to be on the right side of that and they want to fit into that system. I don't disagree with that. I think that fundamental feeling is to be in control or to feel that someone is controlling something for you. And as you say, perception and reality, same thing ultimately in the way that that someone's going to approach that situation. So what is interesting, I suppose, is how you can take that innate knowledge and is there a way of applying something that is universal in terms of marketing? I'm not sure there is, because I do think the drivers for each thing are different, but I definitely agree with you that that is actually the root of what people are wanting to buy when it comes to legal solutions.
Thank you for listening to Firm Factor. This show is brought to you by Time. Time, helping professionals crush their billable hour targets.
What's a big swing you would want to see if you had a client who like came out of the woodwork tomorrow and they said, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do something crazy that's never been done before. What's your gut reaction for what that would be? Like, what do you wish if all the objections fell away, what do you wish you or one of your clients could be working on right now?
That's a curly one.
Don't worry, we'll cut out all the consideration times.
Yeah. Cut out all the That's right. Make me look really confident and straight in. I actually don't mind having time to consider it. I think that over the last few years, I've recognized that within the legal industry, there are a lot more parameters than I've had in previous industries. And I mean literally legal parameters around things that can be said and done. With some of our law firms, for example, we have to have a lot of disclaimers on any advertising. So it's a really interesting question because I have had to stay within the rails to a certain degree and recognize that actually there are quite big guardrails for legal marketing. So if you mean removing all of that, what would I choose to do? Because I'm not sure there is an option. I actually think some of the things that we are doing with Hemet are the things that we would love to be able to do with other law firms. And I don't
plug.
mean to, I know, right? I'm not trying to be sycophantic by saying that, but genuinely, I think that some of the things that you guys are doing and the way you're prepared to push the boat with trying things to connect with your prospective clients. I wish more of our clients were open to doing video work. I think that's one of the biggest things. And I know that doesn't sound particularly grandiose or exciting, but I think it's one of the things that is so immensely powerful. Mm-hmm. And we don't have clients that are very open to doing that, that can find the time to do it, that are comfortable doing it. We have some amazing clients, but I would say on the whole, the majority of lawyers that we speak to are not naturally comfortable in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. They're not naturally comfortable in front of many people, to be honest with you. And so I think that anything that, you can tell there is a level of awkwardness in having to be face to face, and I think because they're comfortable with being in the legal, So I hope that doesn't offend anybody.
No, I love moments like that. I think like selfishly, I'm here because we've had the exact same observation, right? It's so many of our team are super talented, super sharp legal minds, but like attorneys listening to this, like you don't feel bad. You did not go to law school to be a freaking media personality.
Absolutely right.
Like,
absolutely right. That's exactly right. And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here. Is I wouldn't expect my lawyer to be comfortable on camera. That's not what I'm paying them for. Mm-hmm. But I do think that as someone who consumes media primarily through video, I would say that's just me as a person, and I think that's true of a lot of people, and especially of a certain demographic. There is a real opportunity there. So whether that is a way of perhaps finding someone to be a spokesperson for you, or a different kind of video, I mean, there are lots of opportunities to make content that doesn't actually require you to be front facing. I think it's advantageous if you're comfortable in front of the camera to do that, because so much of, especially for single person or perhaps two person law firms, it is all about the personality. You're relying on that a lot. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have a comedic personality or a strong, sort of charismatic personality on camera, but I do think that actually presenting yourself as a human being is useful. Also, increasingly, especially in this now, we have so much of a focus on authority for both SEO and AEO, that anything that you can do to position yourself as a person of authority and expertise online is extremely helpful. So I think for a lot of lawyers that we work with, they rely on referral, which is absolutely fine. It is the way that most people find lawyers, is through referral. Now, that can be Google reviews, actually, because a lot of people will trust Google reviews and Trustpilot as much as they trust a personal recommendation. But referral is absolutely fine as a way of getting clients. But I would say that increasingly people are doing a lot of their searching online, or with voice questions, or with ChatGTP. And so I think the more that you can show up online as an authority, the more that's going to benefit you. And I think video is a great way to do that, partly because that's how people consume, and partly because you can also utilize transcripts. You can utilize other metadata that allows you to be found through multiple ways.
Well, I mean, as like lawyers may be listening to this and they're like, oh, I don't have time to get in front of a camera.
Yes.
Look, me and my team, we started another different unrelated podcast called Gossip Without Prejudice. We started it, and then we started posting in May of this year, and then within 6 weeks we had like 12.5 million impressions just on TikTok and Instagram. And we have like 50,000 followers, and we still get like 20,000 impressions a day, even though we haven't posted in like a month, which is crazy. And we did that. The way we did that was we just posted bar exam questions. We just did a bar exam question, and it was called Non-Lawyer Takes the Bar Exam, and that's it. And then we could record like 30 of those in an hour. And then we had enough content for the next 2 weeks, and it almost ran on autopilot, right? Here, we only spend like an hour in the studio to put on this show every single week. And yeah, we do a little bit of editing, but like in terms of consumed time for people involved, this is a very light lift, right? And and we take this podcast and we chop it up into bits, into podcast clips, and then we're going to maybe do a newsletter, and then we're going to put it on our websites, and we're going to put it in emails. You know, we're going to do all sorts of stuff with this. But a good way to phrase, like, one thing I've always struggled with is, like, to explain to attorneys how this is a value add for their shareholders, right? And this is a value add because being known, walking into a room and being known before you get there is the most valuable opportunity I have. I had Mike Rafey, for those of you that don't know, is like the biggest personal injury attorney on YouTube and like TikTok, right? That is also actually practicing and not just a content creator. And after I did Gossip About Prejudice, I just DM'd him. And I was like, hey, you want to come on the podcast? We had him on the podcast. Cost us nothing. It was so sick. He just showed up. And I'm in law school at Seattle University at the same time as I do, run the day-to-day at Hemet Law. And I went to orientation, and I got handshakes from people who had watched my podcast, right? And I can tell where someone meets me and acquaints themselves with me. If they're more formal and like professional, then they found me on LinkedIn, right? But if they like come in and they like clap me on the back and they're like laughing with me the first time I met them, they found me through my podcast, right? Because like I argue that I don't even have camera facing skills because I just talk, right? If you're like, as you can plainly see, there is no filter here, right? And that brings us to authenticity, because like the more authentic you are, the more likely you are that like people are going to be drawn to you. And I think the big problem is that all these attorneys are freaking like they're beelining towards content, but they're like content for my business. It's the other way around, right? This is content for you that will help your business, and that difference is like that's everything. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I mean, you made a really great point at the start there as well, that you can take a relatively small piece of content and chop it up and change it and reuse it. So I think you can make what we call evergreen content. So essentially, if you're answering particular questions that then can be used again and again and again, it might be that piece of content actually has leverage for many years, and people may find it down the line and it's still relevant, depending on what you've posted, of course. But I think being able to see it as, right, I might be investing 20 minutes of my time, but I may be able to actually make 15 different videos out of that covers me for the month.
Yep.
So I think there's definitely an intimidation, I think, for some lawyers that, oh, that's something I can't do, or it's something I'm not comfortable doing. And it's not for everyone, of course, and there are different ways to market yourself, but I agree. I think the opportunity there is huge if you can find a way to do it. The fact that you already had people that recognized you, I mean, that is part of referral, because people feel confident that you are going to be able to give them good advice, and it puts a human face to something. And as much as anything in this competitive environment, being front of mind for one reason or another it can make all the difference between being chosen or not chosen.
That's such an interesting point, because I hate referral based marketing. I'm not a huge fan, because okay, so like broadly speaking, even if you're like the top referral on all of your contacts lists, you're sharing and competing for that spot with at minimum 2 or 3 other people or firms or whatever, right? You're always going to be having to pour energy into being top of mind, right? But the worst part is that list is subjective and untraceable, right? And you don't know where it's coming from, right? So as an operations guy, I always hear marketers correctly say that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am saying I listen to that and I go, holy shit, how do I get started? And even if I get off the ground, how do I know if it's going anywhere? And that's why Hemet Law invests mostly in, well, we're B2C, and B2C offices have like a major competitive advantage, in my opinion, and that is if you can set up the pipeline for like getting off the ground and getting a flywheel of incoming clients going for B2C, we don't have to care about long-term relationships. We care and we do good work for our clients, but like it's not like a business law firm where like you have one client and the client works with you for 10 years. No one likes their divorce attorney, right? We knock it out of the park. They still don't like us, and they don't want to talk about us once they're done, which is like totally understandable. But what that means is we have a lot more flexibility to go out there and like not have to care. We're just like, hey, let's just get this unitized advertising budget spend down as low as possible while still achieving our objectives. And then we do this social media stuff. Just honestly, I don't know why we do this. This is an irrational decision because unlike us, unlike contingency offices that can hire from anyone, you usually see trial lawyers doing video content because anyone can hire them. Anyone can refer cases to them. Why I like working at Hemet Law is because we make irrational decisions without a clear ROI, which in turn around and always have huge payoffs in the long run. And that actually brings you to this is what I wanted to ask you about working with us is that what makes Hemet Law unique, if anything, or what is the same about Hemet Law as every other client that you wouldn't expect? But still, we seem to have some X factor here. If you folks go to our website, it does not look like other attorneys' websites. So I would love to hear, your authentic perspective on like what sort of clients we are and how we've gotten so fast so far.
I think that a lot of it comes down to an entrepreneurial spirit. And I don't think that is the case for a lot of lawyers. For a number of reasons. One, it may not come naturally to, especially if they're a very small law firm. They perhaps just feel that it's too high a risk. So the risk versus reward metric just doesn't work for them. But the biggest difference I find working with you and your team is that just like any kind of entrepreneurial business is that you are prepared to take mitigated risk, but you are prepared to take risks to see if something is going to work. I think you also are prepared to look laterally across different segments and different markets to see maybe what's working there and see if it can work for you as a law firm, which I find very interesting. So you're basically trying to rewrite the book a little bit. I find that most of the lawyers we work with, and it could be down to personality or it could be down to the nature of working within a very structured system, also like their business to feel structured, to basically fall very much within a certain set of parameters, which often means that the service that we provide at Legal Rev, we do have different sort of product tiers which are designed to be that way, and that you actually do have a set product, and that works for most of our lawyers. For Hemet Law, we have had a bit of an evolution of that because you have been prepared to push out into different areas. Now, I think it makes it very exciting to work with you guys because it means that we're able to bring the wider skill set of the team into projects that allow us to push the envelope a bit. But I would say that is the biggest difference, is that you have a sense of being prepared to risk something, knowing that you will learn something from it. So even if I don't think you would necessarily even view something as a failure. Everything is a learning. You might try something and say, that hasn't worked exactly how we expected to, but we have learned X, Y, and Z, so let's pivot this way with that knowledge to try this. And it is always failing forward. I think that is something which it would be great for some other companies to feel confident enough to do that. But it is rare. It is very rare.
I think, and that's so interesting, and we can get into this is a topic for another episode. But I already remarked with my head of production, Sam, here, is that in most businesses, the interests of from a finance perspective, the interests of the shareholders, the interests of the business are two completely different set of criteria. Sure. And the bars in this country have mandated by law that those two interests be merged, right? Shareholders aren't comfortable taking risks, but managers have to take risks. They have to. Especially for high margin risks, like high risk, high reward is a generally accurate allegory. For high margin risks, shareholders aren't comfortable with that. That's why publicly traded companies have a managing director that is not often the body of the shareholders, and the shareholders don't have a direct voice in what happens to the company. They appoint people, but here in the law, they're the same, right? And so you can sit down and mathematically calculate that XYZ investment is highly probably, going to pay off for the business, and then they don't do it because it still requires a whole bunch of money going out the door first.
Yeah.
And that's something that, because like Hemet Law, we are maybe should have introed this first because it's so integral to the work we do here, is that like we were a 2-man office, and when we found Legal Rev, we had just gotten burned by another marketing company who hid all of our data, and they wouldn't let us see our Google profile, and it was just, and that we paid per lead instead of per quality. It was just every checkbox of everything you didn't want to have. And I was only 24 at the time, and I was somehow in charge of all of our marketing and admin. And then we found Legal Rev, and I was like, well, these guys seem to know what they're doing. I think, tell us what you need to aggressively market, and then we will, find that. Because I think the big mistake is that you're like, you start with budget and you get to outcome. It should be the other way around. You should go to your marketing company and say, I want XYZ to happen. Do whatever it is within your expertise to as close to guarantee that outcome, and then come back and tell me what that will cost, and then we'll make it work, right? Because I don't think I've ever been in a budget meeting with you, and your SEO team has sometimes struggled with this because it's so unusual. They'll be like, what's your budget? And I'm like, I don't know, top of the market.
Yeah.
You tell me right now how much money that will take, and I will find a way for our finances to provide it. And I think that's so crucial to understand, both when selecting a vendor and selecting a marketing budget. We're at around 18% of our revenue is reinvested back into marketing in various ways, which is pretty aggressive. And sometimes it's been as high as 22%. But I really think that's like an arbitrary metric, right? I don't think that has any. Everyone's always like, oh, somewhere between 8 and 12%, and I'm like, that doesn't matter, right? We've pulled that number out of nowhere. It means nothing, and yet we always ask it. And I've always thought that, frankly, that was just really stupid, right? It was what you want is the outcome, right?
Exactly right.
And what this speaks is to risk. So I define risk as deviations from expected outcomes, right? And what this means is, if I come to you, Rebecca, and I was like, I have a deal for you, and this investment opportunity is guaranteed to lose you $1 billion, right? That is a deal with zero risk. There is no deviation from expected outcomes.
Yep.
Risk doesn't mean bad. Risk means if you put in X, you don't get Y, right? And so I think this is so important of a mindset for people to understand, is that like, you can risk things, and like, you can do everything, you do everything right, it lands, and then it just doesn't work. That's risk. But I think most of the time, law is far less risky than we perceive, because we perceive badness is what risk means. Hemet Law, my absolute psychotic hot take, is that running a law firm is not that hard, right? I think, and I sound like such an arrogant ass every time I say that out loud to another law firm owner. When I was put in charge of admin here, it was 2 of us in a 10 by 10 office. I had no business degree at the time. It was my first legal job, right? And it's been a tremendous amount of work to get from that 2-man office to the 30 of us there are now. And we're just about to crack $700,000 in revenue a month in only a handful of years. And that has been a lot of work to get there, but there has been zero risk in that journey, because we knew if we just put one foot in front of the other, it would work. And it has, right? And so my hope for this show is that we can share not the specific tasks that got us there. I mean, maybe, Rebecca, that probably is more your domain. Mine is to share the mindset of the management that spawned that journey, right? Because our mindset is like, we are not. I actually think it's a real fallacy for like everyone to be listening to legal marketing podcasts and reading legal marketing resources. There is a body politic of marketing that is so much wider than just legal marketing, whatever that means. That I don't listen to attorneys. Like I only listen to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, and that's like my favorite marketing podcast. Shout out to Conrad, and that's it, because we don't work at a law firm, we work at a startup, and our product is law, right? And no one thinks like that. Everyone's looking left and right at what the other law firms are doing. We aren't interested in what other law firms are doing. We want to do something different here, and Legal Rev has been really key in that journey.
Well, we, as I said at the start, that is such a rare paradigm to have. that it's been and again, not trying to be a sycophant, but it's a pleasure to be part of that journey because it is such a different way of thinking to most people. And I mean, that probably goes back to that very primal issue of what people are trying to buy when they work with lawyers. They're trying to buy control. I don't think it's any different actually for lawyers. I think they work within a system that provides control, and that also gives them comfort. That's what they're used to. So to try and push someone that is constantly working within that mindset, within that environment, to say, well, this might lose you $1 billion, but you will learn X, Y, and Z from it, so there's no risk. I can't think that there are many people that would be comfortable with that. So it is definitely a rarity. But I also think that even just having a small amount of that kind of approach to not just marketing, but all, business practices, can be extremely beneficial, because if you just approach it as nothing being a failing but everything actually being a learning opportunity, then you are going to make progress one way or another. And providing you are comfortable with investing in progress, then I think that is something that you are always going to see improvements being made.
Thank you for listening to Firm Factor. This show is brought to you by Legal Rev. Legal Rev, using the power of digital strategy, design, and technology to help law firms grow revenue.
Two things happen when we do really hard things. Either, like we as not just Hemet Law, but like business owners in general, one of two things happens. Either we win huge and we make a ton of money. That's option one. We fall on our face and it's a huge disgrace, in which case we learn a lot. Or option three, nothing happens and we're fine. Right? Those are really the only three potential outcomes of any decision. And what's beautiful about business is that you only got to be right 51% of the time. Right? Right? Like every management team sits down with me and they're like, how do we get this right every time? And I'm like, you psychopaths, like you can just guess. if all things being equal, there's no way to project the road ahead, be it, through anecdote or quantitative data. You can just guess. And as long as that coin flip comes up heads, you've now learned enough to make the proper analytical decision next time. And so feedback loops, and even then, 51, but you can even be wrong 30% of the time. But if you just make decisions faster than all your competitors, right? The knowledge gap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a key thing, because that's the other part of what you do, and is action. Yep. And sometimes, and I don't think you'll mind me saying, there have been several projects that we've started with you which end up by the wayside because you're like, oh no, I've got another idea now. Yep. So you start with something and we put some work into it, and then you're like, park that, we might come back to that. But that agility has meant that you've stayed ahead. And I think that's the big thing here is, yes, you're right. A lot of the time, it is going to be a 50-50 coin flip. But if you just stand there looking at the coin, you're never going to get an outcome.
I love that analogy. Well, my question to you is, why is the CEO or managing partner of the law firm, why are they in charge of marketing? Should they be? I feel like that's a question we don't engage with a lot. And so I'd love to hear your they're the decision maker, but should they be the one in the chair?
I would say almost routinely no, for so many reasons. One, because they are emotionally attached to their own persona, and that often means they can't be objective about actually what's required. So who they think they are and how they should present themselves to the public, to their prospective clients, is almost universally wrong. Sometimes that can actually mean that they have really they've actually really sort of undermined who they are, and they actually have a lot that we could talk about, and they maybe are being humble about it. And in some places there isn't time to be humble. You want to actually put out who you are, and in other cases they may just be very incorrect about who their real market is. So no, I don't think they should be. We are seeing increasingly with our law firms that many law firms, even small law firms, are starting to hire people in to actually be involved in the marketing decisions, whether that be an operations person or whether that be actually a marketing assistant. I think that can help. So one thing I'm going to say, which is, and this is coming from being someone in marketing, is the danger of having a marketing person that you change out to regularly. So if you have an assistant and then perhaps a year later, that assistant that's come in and they're fresh out of college and they've got these big ideas and then they move on to something else and another one comes in, because I would say that generally speaking, the people that we deal with who are marketing assistants within law firms, they're very new, which comes with some brilliant new fresh ideas and enthusiasm, but also means maybe a lack of confidence. When a marketing manager changes over, almost without fail, the new marketing person wants to
pivot,
sort of make their mark, and sort of prove why they're better, and unfortunately that can mean that some of the things that you've built up get sort of washed away. And the other thing is, especially when you are like we are focused on SEO, so we do ads and we do marketing campaigns, but we are very much in the long game as well. That's a big part of what we do is, so we might have short, very impactful campaign work that we do, but we're very focused on making sure that your business is set up for the long term, partly because with some legal decisions, they take time to make that decision, and partly because with some it takes time to build front of mind mentality. So we're very much about that. And if you get someone new coming in that has new, fresh ideas, that can derail those things quite quickly. But no, sorry, going back to your original question, because that was a bit of a tangent. I think that most people that run their own business, especially if they've built it from the ground up, are very emotionally involved, and it takes a rare person to be able to separate themselves objectively and let someone actually tell them what they might need to market their business. So I think you do get some people that have really good instincts, and that's great, but for the most part, I think it is better to have an objective person do it for you.
I mean, I think that's what's been so my role is very fluid at Hemet Law. I define my role. Actually, I've never had a job description, because I was hired as a part-time legal assistant, right? Well, many years ago now, almost 7 years ago. I'd only just been able to buy alcohol for like 9 months, which is crazy to say out loud. Why would you ever entrust that person with any amount of responsibility? The difference maker is that my job is to entrench, expand, and develop unfair competitive advantages, right? However or wherever that may be, right? And we don't define it any more than that, because my job is to go and find those opportunities wherever they lay. There are no sacred cows, right? It's not like market the business better, right? Because then that defines the competitive advantages within the narrow lane of just marketing, right? Like I could be, every 6 months, I have a new job. Right, and what's dominated the last 6 months is social media, right? Content development, building out our new pipeline for further, further video opportunities, mastering short form content, getting good on camera, right? That's what I've been up to. But before that, I was building out our intake team and systems, and now I have a person that runs that for me. And before that, it was figuring out how to practice law efficiently, what systems to put in place, and then I finished that project. And if you go far enough back, the entire office just sort of accordions into like a little box. It's like one of those dinosaurs you drop in water and then it expands out, right? And I'm sure in another year I will have fired myself from this job, right? I'll find something else that's new and exciting. And everyone has always heard of like the 1% rule, where it's like if you get 1% better at something every single day for a year, you'll be like 340% better by the end of the year or something like that. I don't care about that 1% rule. To me, the 1% rule Hemet Law follows is that we only want to be doing what 1% of firms are up to, right? Because it's incrementally on a per unit basis. It is far more profitable to do insane stuff that no one else is trying terribly than it is to do what everyone else is doing excellently. It's like combustion engines, right? The combustion engine has been around for like 120 years now, and it is the incremental developmental changes every single year is like, oh, the engine is now half a degree cooler. It's now we now have 0.48% more gas mileage per efficiency. That's because there's just not that much blood to squeeze out of that stone, right? But on the other hand, electric cars have been wildly developing super quickly in the last 7 years, and that's because there's so much room to be sloppy and stupid and to try crazy things, and so you capture way more of the market doing what no one else is doing, and that is why Hemet Law has done so much crazy stuff. Is because it's like no one else is doing this, right? Even if we fall on our face, falling forward on our face still gets us 2 more feet than all of our other competitors.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a rarity, but I actually think it's the way that the job market will be going in the future, is working towards, your big sort of audacious goal. That is what your job description is your big audacious goal. How you get there and how you actually track to that, I think will become more fluid, as I hope it should. I mean, it's a whole other conversation to talk about sort of education and the way that it is actually compartmentalized, and the shift that I hope will happen. I realize that AI in education is a contentious subject, but just in terms of the way that we are all working now,
Yep.
I think working towards what you actually want to achieve, and also being open to that goal shifting, that fluidity is unusual, but I think it actually is what has allowed you and your team to do things that other law firms are not doing.
Yep.
Is because you are very much open to saying, well, that's what we're trying to achieve. How we get there, we don't know.
Yep.
We're going to a certain degree, build the plane as it goes down the runway. And we're, our intention is at the end that it will soar, and we're going to learn a hell of a lot of stuff because we kind of have to by the end of the runway. I think that I think there will be more of a shift to that, but I would say that from my experience of the law firms we work with, and we work with hundreds of law firms, I would say that they will be the least comfortable moving to that way of working. And to a large degree, that's intentional. They are all about rules. They are all about making sure that people are able to sit within the rules, benefit from the rules, be protected by the rules. But from a business point of view, if you can find a sweet spot where you can understand that those rules are part of what you sell, but that as a business you have some freedom to actually find a new way of approaching that. I think that is a really unique place to be, but I do hope that is the way things go a little bit more.
I mean, because creativity is inefficient inherently, right? I talk to a lot of, I'm also a law firm consultant, so we have a small consultancy wing here, which is quite unusual for a law firm. But we hear people say that we tried something and it wasted so much money, and I'm like, yeah, of course, right? Hemet Law have probably wasted close to $1 million in the last 3 years on nonsense that went nowhere. And either in manpower hours or in direct spend, or all sorts of stuff. Just the highway is littered with. But asking for the ROI on creative projects is like asking for the ROI on someone's mother. What's the what's the return on having a loving family? That's the wrong question, right? If you look for efficiency. If you look for rational efficiency in a system of irrationality, you are inherently going to be disappointed almost immediately, right? But there's no other way to put that.
Well, and I think, it's an interesting point that efficiency is our, sort of post-industrial revolution. Efficiency is our metric of success. And across so many industries, even across education. But I think that efficiency, it will start to become a relative concept, especially now that we have ways to sort of automate our efficiency with a lot of the tasks that we used to sort of praise people if they could do a particular task efficiently. If it can now be done by machination, then we don't necessarily have to value efficiency in quite the same way. There perhaps will start to become time for more creativity. And while efficiency is still obviously useful, and certainly coming from, I am the director of marketing, but I also have been, director of operations, that role before, and head of production, that efficiency is very important to me. I do not like time to be wasted. I like lists to be ticked. I'm very much someone that likes to ensure that things run smoothly. However, I also, I actually have a fine art degree. back a long time ago, and have worked in design thinking courses and working for a brand agency, recognize the importance of having the time and the space to play in order to actually come up with ideas. I think that the idea of that as being wasted time is something that comes from this idea that efficiency and productivity is paramount. And it's something which a lot of the startups understand that you actually need that space. So that's interesting earlier on that you mentioned that, you don't see yourselves as a law firm as such. You are a startup that happens to sell legal solutions. And that's a key thing, is that many startups, they will have, sandpits and skunk works that allows their team to say, well, we know that this is our goal. How do we get there? Try it and see what happens.
Spend money, go crazy, do inefficient, stupid things. I also think that the big death knell, and it's again another whole episode of its own, opportunity cost is completely misunderstood by law firms. If you are a partner that charges $1,000 an hour, and you have 4 one-hour meetings with your marketing company yourself, then just those meetings you've just cost your business $4,000 you could have been spending billing clients, right? This is the argument I make for, like, when I talk to law firm owners, and I'm like, so who's running your systems? Who's setting up, do you have a paralegal setting up your new calling system? Are they installing Clio or Filevine or whatever? Like, who have you put in charge of that? And they're like, oh yeah, it's Stacy. They're our legal assistant. I'm like, congratulations. That's your chief operating officer. You're just not calling them that. Promote them immediately. And then most importantly, let them off the leash, right? Because it's a 2-part test. First, do you have someone in the building, right? Pretty important. Step 1, half the time, yes, which I give a lot of firms credit for. Where they fall flat is where they insist on handling everything themselves, and they cover their marketing or operations person in red tape and then sink them, and then get mad that that they seem to have no time, and also that person can't get anything done because management, the managing partners are crawling down their throats, even though that inexperienced legal assistant might have more technology experience than the managing partner. And then that time cost is never factored, right? If you were to send me a bill, like if opportunity costs were included in the bills that we pay, the fucking change in behavior would be so fast. It would be crazy.
So true.
We're coming to the end of our hour, Rebecca.
Yes.
What do you want to leave off with? What in this introduction to you and like a little bit of our relationship as Hemet Law's client and marketing company? What do you want the people to know?
I think the biggest takeaway, and certainly from our discussion, the thing that I think is most interesting and exciting is the idea of being prepared to try things and not fearing failing or being embarrassed. I think people often stop themselves from, certain marketing things or certain online things because they're worried of appearing foolish, or they're worried about the time that it takes. And I think it's just worth saying that, with risk comes reward one way or another. And I just hope increasingly that perhaps as we go through this podcast and talk through things, that maybe people feel a bit empowered to take some risks and learn from them. And perhaps try a few different things with either their marketing or their business that are a little bit outside of what they would normally do, just to see if that actually makes a big difference to their practice.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment. Everybody, we will be... Yeah, we'll restart that. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Thank you. This has been Firm Factor, the show where we cannot do our outro scripts. We'll be back next week. We'll be doing a very similar one next week. We just wanted to do a couple of intro episodes because people didn't know. We have a lot of new audience members. People don't know too much about me or about Rebecca or about Legal Rev, about Hemet Law. And so we are really hoping, or at least I'm really hoping, that you draw something from our stories and expertise. I think there's a lot of legal marketing podcasts out there that are just like sales funnels for their respective legal marketing companies. And we really want to try and build something different. So thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you for listening to Firm Factor. Please find all resources listed in show notes.